In this next prototype, I want to model a Scrabble board and find the best Scrabble choice given the player's tile and a provided dictionary, and I need to do a little bit of modeling. And I find that modeling is probably the most interesting type of question that I do. By modeling, what I mean is I have some problem, and in that problem, I need to figure out how to represent something. I need to figure out what structures to use, what the API should look like. And this is a case where it is often that I won't start when I'm trying to prove that I can solve a problem with an object-oriented approach, but anytime I want to model, I think it's oftentimes very valuable to start from the API. And so here, I don't want to just solve the game of Scrabble. I want to figure out how somebody would write code using a library that I provide to them in order to model some aspect or to create an automatic Scrabble player or to do something like that. And so here, I might start with what I want that code to look like. Do I need an if name equals main block here? I don't. But this is part of getting my thinking aligned with, okay, somebody's going to do something like from Scrabble lib, import whatever, and they're going to write a script with this. So I'm just kind of going through the paces, the steps of what this looks like. Here, what I probably want is, I guess there could be different Scrabble boards. There could be different layouts of tools. So I might want to do something like board equals Scrabble, and I might say something like from default. And here, I already kind of get a sense for what this looks like, because if somebody wanted to have a Scrabble board that was defined in, like, say, a JSON file, I can imagine they might do Scrabble, from JSON, and they have the specification of the board. Or if they wanted to create one of these, from a specification in some particular format, they might do this. Or if they wanted to figure out what the raw Python objects that were needed to construct this, like what the size of the board is, where the double word scores, the triple word scores, and things like that are, they might write this. Now, if I'm thinking of playing a game of Scrabble, the next thing I might think is I need to deal the tiles out to each player. And so notice I didn't say, start with a class called game, because I'm not quite sure that grouping is really valuable yet. I know the grouping of the board is valuable because there's going to be operations like, what does the board look like? Are there spaces that are open? What is the scoring? Because the board, in part, determines some of the scoring, right? What are the score multipliers? So I guess the board would tell me what the score multipliers are. Here, I guess there would be some tile set. And again, I might do something like the default tile set. So these are all the tiles. And from that, I might think, okay, what's the next thing that I need to do? Well, I have the tile set. Then, for my player, I just need to ask them for some random tiles. Now, here's one question. Here, I can do this in a couple of different ways. This could just be a list that I pop off of. And so oftentimes I might think, what, do I really need this? What other operations are going to do with the tile set? The only thing they're really going to do is just get things out of it. So this might be something more like this. Tile set from the, frequencies. So this might be, actually, you know what? I might not even bother to code that up. I might allow you to just provide these. So here, I might have some tile set just be some list, because then I can do the following. The players' tiles are just a popping of these like that. So that's what the player tile has tiles for. And then, if they're trying to do an automatic solver, then they're going to do something like find Scrabble, and that finds all the possible candidates given this in a word list. And so obviously I need some kind of word list. And I guess that's where I might take my word list code from before and do something like word list from file. Here, is that really that useful? I don't know, because I don't know that this is going to have other options. So here I might actually even just make this, just a set. And these are my candidates. And then this is the candidate that they play, or their play maybe, is a maximization of these candidates over some particular predicate. And here, this is where it's kind of tricky. One of the things that we can see is I can provide this to an end user and say, are these the kind of things that you want to do as part of mocking this up? Is there anything else that you want to mock up? And you could begin to kind of think through this and think about the limitations. For example, what data does this scoring need? Well, this finds the max candidate. Here I'm kind of assuming that they're doing something like from Scrabble lib import Scrabble and score and say, find Scrabble like that. But here, doesn't the score have some relationship with the board and maybe the rule set? Maybe we'll exclude the idea of the rule set for now, like whether you get extra points for using all 7 tiles or not. So maybe we just think about the board by itself. I think this requires both the board and some sort of tile scoring mechanism. And where do I store this tile scoring mechanism? That's kind of tricky. So here I might say, oh, you know what? This should probably be some Python list of some tile maybe object. And this tile object has what the letter happens to be and maybe what the score is. And some duplication of these. That might be what my choice is like, because then you can see where I could also have like a magic tile in there that, it's the 1Z that's worth 100 points. The other thing is whether you match against that tile might be something that the tile can decide. So I can do like the blank tile as an option here. So I could do something like a blank tile, maybe. And so here you can see I'm beginning to try and suss out what the entities of this game are. And if that's the case, then the scoring can definitely work on the candidates, but it needs to be some property of the board. So now this allows me to make a decision, which would be use the score method constructed from the board. And so now I think I have enough pieces to kind of map this out. Here I might have a simple data class, and I love using things like the name tuple or the data class just to minimize how much effort I have to do in my initial prototypes. So here, this is I guess the layout of the board. I don't know what that looks like yet. And here is some from default. That's a class method. That's just going to return an instance of this class. And here, I don't actually know what the layout's going to look like just yet. And it has some mechanism called score, which is going to be on the instance, clearly, and takes a word. So that gives me the individualized score of a word. And I guess that assumes all the different placements. So this can't take into account if somebody's strategically playing Scrabble in order to make it hard for you to do the next thing. This really is only able to model a game where you're just trying to find the optimal place where you could place a word. So this would be actually interesting. This should actually return something. Oh, see? By mapping this out, I just discovered something. This doesn't tell you where to place the word. It only tells you what word to put on the board. And there could be many places, many choices for where you want to put it. So now I have to think, oh, that's interesting. This actually shouldn't be a mapping of the candidates or a maximization of the candidates against the score. This should be a maximization of the board's possible positions or possible placements of a set of candidates given the score, and then it should return what the placement is. Because otherwise I don't know, oh, do I put it over here? Do I put it over here? I put it over in one particular place. And so that also indicates that I need to have a critical aspect of this being here. And I can decide whether this is multiple candidates or one candidate. Maybe this should be all the placements for one particular candidate, and it gives me all the places where this can be. And so maybe I have to do like board.placements for C and candidates, like that. And we can, through this process, kind of discover what our API will look like. Clearly, our tile is pretty simple. That's just some data class that is some letter, which is some single-digit string, and maybe some score or some value, because it's not really the overall score. It's the value, which is some integer value, probably, hopefully, some positive integer value. Ooh, that would be interesting. Scrabble, where if you happen to use the letter Q, it's worth negative points. Where they just are like, no Q words, folks. This is not the game that we're playing here. Because you know what the next letter is going to be. It's going to be a U. And you can see we can start to map this out. Now, from here, notice that the rest of the code is actually pretty obvious what I need to write. Placements is just, at its simplest, some algorithm that randomly goes through all of the possibilities and determines what the choice is. It needs to exhaustively tell me all the possibilities. So not even randomly, it just exhaustively goes through all of these. By the way, I don't have a Scrabble lib here. And it should be Scrabble like this. And you can think, score is really just given a particular placement, given a particular layout. How do you do that? I don't really need to do the from JSON from the beginning because I might have to go back and forth with somebody who manages a data feed to tell me what that might look like. The tile, a blank tile is a tile. And maybe if I want that matching mechanism, then I need to say something like a match. And that's going to be a little bit harder. So that's maybe one area that I need to think about a little bit more of. How do I actually do the matching and whether I really want this to be in here? And I think this gives me, a nice starting point. By the way, this is worth 0. And this is probably a data class with just a score. So maybe you have a blank tile that's worth something and a blank tile that's not worth something, but it doesn't have a string portion. And here, that's interesting. I probably, need to do that. And I guess I didn't have enough, I didn't have enough entries here. So I'll just get enough here to make this work. And find Scrabble is really just finding all the candidates. And it's a mechanism for finding the candidates. So I don't think that's dependent on anything else. So here, this could just be the word and the word list. And then I might choose later whether I want to pull this find Scrabble up into my word list class or not, whether that's too specific or not. But this just finds my Scrabble candidates like that. And you can see I've mapped out the API. I can give this to somebody. I can kind of get them to think about how they might use this. And then the rest of this implementation is actually pretty obvious. It's really the same micro process of finding the Scrabble. Notice how the simple examples that we've shown you so far are not actually a lie. It is possible with this approach to do the overall design separately from the implementation of the individual pieces. And so the simple examples have just situated themselves into this overall design.